Welcome back, I am the Atomic Pun, and this is your Two-Headed Giant limited guide for Magic the Gathering Foundations. Ask your LGS if they're running any Two-Headed Giant pre-release events, as it is the best way to play limited Magic, especially if you have a buddy. Go into a pre-release and playing 1v1, you don't get to see your buddy except between rounds, but in Two-Headed Giant, you get to play together as a team. And if you have someone that's not as good at Magic as you are, you can help them strategize. And if they're better than you, they can help you strategize. In this video, I'm going to go over what makes a card better in Two-Headed Giant. We're going to look at some of the cards that are best from this set for Two-Headed Giant. I'll specifically start with the commons and uncommons because you'll see a lot of those in your pre-release, and then move on to rares and mythics. We'll also look at the cards to avoid because they're not as good in Two-Headed Giant, and any cards that might have some odd rules interactions. If you like this content, don't forget to subscribe. I also do daily pack opening videos on YouTube Shorts, so check those out. And let's get into it. The big thing to look out for on cards in Two-Headed Giant is cards that refer to each opponent or each player, as opposed to target opponent or target player. Because in Two-Headed Giant, even though you are one team playing against another team, you still have two opponents on the other team. So if a card says each opponent loses 2 life, that's 2 opponents that each lose 2 life, so the opposing team is going to lose a total of 4 life. The other thing to look out for is that when a card refers to you, it is referring to you as the player, not your whole team. So let's look at an example here. Let's say you have an Angel of Vitality that says if you would gain life, gain that much life +1 instead. And your teammate has Authority of the Consuls, which says whenever a creature an opponent controls enters, you gain 1 life. Now your opponent plays a Bear Cub. Authority of the Consuls will trigger, gaining 1 life, but your Angel of Vitality will not trigger because you are not the player that gained 1 life. So your team will only gain 1 life total. The same works for damage. Damage is done to an individual player, and then the team's life total is changed based on the damage dealt. You will notice that most of the cards I talk about are in red and black, because those are the cards that feature the most each opponent or each player type abilities, but there are cards in other colors that will make a difference as well. So now let's take a look at some of the cards that I think will make the biggest impact in your Two-Headed Giant event. I'm going to start with a few red cards, including Bolt Wave, which I think is going to make a big difference in Two-Headed Giant. Bolt Wave deals 3 damage to each opponent, and when you pair that with Firebrand Archer, which deals 1 damage to each opponent whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Gutter Snipe, which deals 2 damage to each opponent when you cast an instant or sorcery, or Fire Spitter Whelp, which deals 1 damage to each opponent when you cast a non-creature or dragon spell, you can rack up some serious damage. Bolt Wave on its own is going to deal 6 damage to the opposing team, but if you had each of these other 3 creatures on the battlefield at the time you cast Bolt Wave, that's 14 total damage to the opposing team, almost half their starting life total. A few other cards in red that I like are Impact Tremors and Spitfire Lagak. Each have the text of dealing 1 damage to each opponent. Impact Tremors triggering when a creature you control comes onto the battlefield, and Spitfire Lagak triggering with landfall. So you can see there is a suite of red cards that can be pinging your opponent's life total down very quickly. Black has a number of cards that will cause each opponent to lose life. Sanguine Siphoner, Vampire Neonate, Marauding Blight Priest, and Exsanguinate all drain the opponent's life. So you can see how having a Vampire Neonate on the battlefield with a Marauding Blight Priest would be beneficial. When you activate Vampire Neonate's ability to cause each opponent to lose 1 life, Marauding Blight Priest's ability will also trigger, causing each opponent to lose an additional life because of the life gain from Vampire Neonate. Meaning each time you activate this ability, the opponents lose 4 life. Pulse Tracker, Garna Bloodfist of Keld, and Perforating Artist also are cards that will drain each opponent's life. They're a little bit harder to trigger, but they still could make a difference. Knight of Grace and Knight of Malice are also better in Two-Headed Giant, not because they affect each opponent, but because their hexproof and pump abilities are more likely to be relevant with more players playing different colors.
Ravenous Amulet is another card. If you are running a sacrifice strategy, then you could see the soul counters build up on this artifact and be able to ping the opponent for a pretty significant chunk of damage. Twin Blade Paladin also is significantly better in Two-Headed Giant, as you start with 30 life, so your team can even lose 5 life and it will still have double strike. Runaway Together is also fantastic in Two-Headed Giant because it says choose 2 target creatures controlled by different players. In a 1v1 format, you would have to be one of those players, but in Two-Headed Giant, you could pick 1 creature controlled by each of your opponents. Mindsparker is also buffed in Two-Headed Giant, as you are more likely to have at least one opponent playing white or blue, so its ability to deal 2 damage to an opponent is more likely to happen.
Vampire Spawn and Soul Shackled Zombie drain each opponent for 2 life when they enter. Burglar Rat and Blood Tithe Collector force each opponent to discard a card, which means the opposing team goes down by 2 cards. An Arbiter of Woe puts both of these abilities together in 1 card.
Most protection spells or buffs will force you to target a creature that you control, but keep an eye out for some of these cards that can target any creature, such as Axe Guard Cavalry, which could give haste to a teammate's creature, or Battle Rattle Shaman, which could give a teammate's creature +2/+0 until end of turn. And most aura enchantments can be placed on any creature, so if it makes more sense for you to enchant your teammate's creature, you can do that as well. Special note with Ordeal of Nylea, even if you attach it to your teammate's creature, you are still in control of it. So when the teammate's creature hits 3 +1/+1 counters, you would sacrifice it and you would search your library for basic land cards. I started with the commons and uncommons because those are the cards that you're most likely to see in any given game at your Two-Headed Giant limited event. Now I'm going to talk briefly about some of the rares and mythics. I won't spend too long on them because ultimately the best thing to do in limited is play your bombs. So if you pull any of these cards, you're going to play them, but I want to talk about what makes them better in Two-Headed Giant. Consuming Aberration is a rare where its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards. Your opponent has 2 graveyards, so that is twice as many cards. And its Enter's ability will cause each of your opponents to mill, doubling the mill and doubling the amount of power and toughness gain. Commander players not going to be surprised to see a tally on this list, as more players means more free spells. Torian Mauler will grow twice as fast with 2 opponents, gaining a 1/1 counter each time an opponent casts a spell. Painful Quandary can be an oppressive ability, forcing your opponents to discard a card or lose 5 life every time they cast a spell. It's even more appealing given that your teammate can work to protect while you spend 5 mana on this enchantment. Tiny Bone's activated ability will cause the opposing team to discard 2 cards, and with more players discarding cards, that is more cards that Tiny Bones could play. Dread Summons is a bomb rare in limited for sure, with most limited decks playing a significant number of creatures, but with 4 players milling cards, you could end up with a significant zombie army. Pair that with Impact Tremors and you could end the game just with casting this spell. Authority of the Consuls is going to gain twice as much life with 2 opponents, and while Scrawling Crawler will give the opposing team 2 extra cards on your upkeep, it's also going to ping the opposing team for 2 life on both yours and your opponent's draw steps. Let's be honest, you are going to play Bloodthirsty Conqueror regardless of whether or not you're playing Two-Headed Giant, but gaining twice as much life when you cast a spell like Bolt Wave is a definite bonus. Rise of the Dark Realms also gets twice as good, with twice as many graveyards to pull creatures out of. Then we've got some Planeswalkers. Liliana, Ajani, and Kaito all have ultimates that get significantly better with more players, but let's be honest, if you are ultimating a Planeswalker in Limited, you are probably going to win anyway. Lathril, Blade of the Elves, also has the ability to ping the opposing team for 20 life, but you need to have 10 elves on the field in addition to Lathril. So if you were in that commanding position anyway, you were probably going to win. Now let's look at some cards that are not as good in Two-Headed Giant as they would be in a 1v1 format. The first one is Sorcerous Spyglass, which allows you to look at target opponent's hand, so not both opponents, just one target opponent. And the activated abilities do not trigger for all players, so if your teammate happens to be running the card that you want to name, now neither your opponent nor your teammate get to use the activated abilities. Then we have Desecration Demon, which allows any opponent to sacrifice a creature. In Two-Headed Giant, board states can get pretty big, so the chances of both of your opponents having one creature between the two of them that they can do without is more likely, which means this card is going to have less impact on the game. Deadly Brew is going to force your teammate to sacrifice a creature or planeswalker of their choice as well, but your teammate does not get the added benefit of
returning a permanent from the graveyard to their hand if they sacrificed.
And now for some cards that have some unique rules interactions in Two-Headed Giant. If you happen to pull Herald of Eternal Dawn, it says you can't lose the game. That does extend to your teammate. So your teammate can also not lose the game because you win or lose the game as a team. Trigon Predator lets you destroy an artifact or enchantment that an opponent controls when you deal damage to that opponent. In Two-Headed Giant, you don't usually specify which opponent you're attacking, but it would make a difference with this creature, as you would want to target a specific opponent to make sure that you could destroy their artifact or enchantment. Wishclaw Talisman does say an opponent gains control of this artifact after you use it to search your library, which means that the controller of that effect gets to choose which opponent gains control of the artifact. It doesn't have to go back to the person who initially played it. And Eily Eternal Pilgrim's second ability does say it can only be activated if you have 10 more life than your starting life total. Even though you and your teammate gain life separately, you do share a life total. So you don't have to have gained 10 life yourself. It can be the team's life total being above 40.
Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if anything I said helped you out in your Two-Headed Giant limited event. Remember to like and subscribe, and check back for my daily pack opening videos.